He stood there in his $15,000 suit, holding a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly rent, and asked me the most ridiculous question I'd ever heard. Would I stay in his chateau through Christmas, even though the wedding I'd flown across the Atlantic Ocean to plan had just exploded in my face an hour ago? I should have said no, should have grabbed my suitcase and my daughter and gotten on the next flight back to Austin, but instead I heard myself whisper yes, and that single word changed absolutely everything about my life. Welcome to Drama Coda. Stay with me till the very end of this story, hit that like button, and rate my story 1 to 10 in the comments because you're not going to believe what happened next. My name is Emma Rodriguez, and I need you to understand something right from the start. I'm not the kind of woman who believes in fairy tales. I'm 41 years old, I've got a 12-year-old daughter named Sophia, I've been divorced for 7 years, and I run a wedding planning business in Austin, Texas that I built from absolutely nothing after my ex-husband decided his dental hygienist was more exciting than the life we'd created together. I know exactly how much work goes into making something beautiful look effortless. I know that behind every perfect moment is someone like me, someone with a clipboard and a backup plan and another backup plan for when that backup plan falls apart. So when Isabelle Moreau contacted me in October about planning her destination wedding at her fiancé's family's chateau in the Loire Valley for Christmas week, I didn't see romance. I saw an opportunity. A huge opportunity. The kind that could take my little business and turn it into something that didn't keep me up at night wondering if I could make next month's rent and Sophia's orthodontist bill at the same time. The deposit alone was more money than I'd made in the previous 6 months combined. Isabelle was French-American, 28, beautiful in that effortless way that made me feel like I was trying too hard just by existing. Her fiancé was Philippe Laurent, 31, heir to a wine empire that had been in his family for 6 generations. And me? I was the American wedding planner who was supposed to make their Christmas wedding look like something out of a movie. I should have known something was wrong when Isabelle called me 17 times in the 2 weeks before we left for France. Not emailed. Called. At 10 at night, at 6 in the morning, once while I was in the middle of helping Sophia with her algebra homework. Each time with some new detail that absolutely had to be perfect, some new worry that everything would fall apart if we didn't get it exactly right. But I didn't listen to that little voice in my head that whispered this woman is terrified, because I was too busy being excited about the fact that I was actually going to France for the first time in my life, and I was bringing my daughter with me, and maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something bigger than the life I'd been living. We landed in Paris on December 18th. The chateau was 2 hours south, and Isabelle had arranged for a car to pick us up. Sophia pressed her face against the window the entire drive, watching the French countryside roll past, the little villages with their stone buildings and Christmas lights, the vineyards sleeping under the winter sky. She kept asking me if this was real, if we were really here, and I kept saying yes, baby, we're really here, even though part of me couldn't quite believe it either. The Chateau Laurent appeared at the end of a long driveway lined with bare trees wrapped in tiny white lights. It was bigger than I'd imagined from the photos, older, more real somehow. 3 stories of pale stone, dozens of windows glowing gold in the late afternoon light, a fountain in the circular driveway that had been turned off for winter but decorated with evergreen garlands and deep red ribbons. The whole place looked like something from a Christmas card, the kind you see in stores and think nobody actually lives like that. But somebody did live like that. Somebody named Philippe Laurent. I didn't meet him that first day. Isabelle met us at the door, more frantic than she'd sounded on the phone, pulling me inside before I'd even said hello to Sophia properly, talking so fast I could barely understand her mix of English and French. The wedding was in 5 days, on December 23rd, and there were a million things to do, and where had I been, and did I bring the fabric samples, and what about the menu changes she'd emailed about at 3 in the morning? Sophia got shuffled off to a guest room by a housekeeper who spoke exactly 4 words of English. I got pulled into what Isabelle called the planning room, which was really just a dining room that had been taken over by binders and fabric swatches and seating charts that looked like they'd been redrawn 100 times. We worked until almost midnight that first night. Isabelle drank 3 glasses of wine and cried twice. I started to realize that this wasn't just pre-wedding jitters. This was something deeper, something scared, but every time I tried to ask her if she was okay, She'd wave her hand and change the subject to the flowers or the music or whether we should have assigned seating or let people choose. I didn't see Julian at all that day. Or the next day. Or the day after that. On the third day, December 21st, I finally asked where he was. Isabel's face did something complicated. Still in Paris, she said. Business. He'll be here tomorrow. That should have been my second warning sign, but I was too deep in centerpieces and catering timelines to pay attention. Sophia was having the time of her life exploring the chateau grounds with the housekeeper's daughter, who was teaching her French phrases in exchange for English ones. The chef was a miracle worker who'd figured out how to incorporate Isabel's constant menu changes without complaining once. Everything was coming together beautifully, even if the bride was falling apart. And then I met Philippe. It was late afternoon on December 21st. I was in the garden behind the chateau, checking the placement for the ceremony chairs, making sure the view of the sunset would hit exactly right. The air was cold enough that I could see my breath, and everything smelled like wood smoke and pine and something else I couldn't name, something that felt like France in a way I couldn't explain. I heard footsteps on the gravel path behind me and turned around expecting the gardener. It wasn't the gardener. The man walking toward me was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair going silver at the temples and eyes that were so intensely focused on me that I actually took a step back. He was wearing dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than my car, and he moved like someone who was used to owning every space he entered. But it wasn't arrogance exactly. It was something quieter than that. Something certain. "You must be Emma," he said, and his voice had an accent that made my name sound like something more interesting than it actually was. "I am," I said, trying to remember how to act like a professional human being and not someone who'd just forgotten how to breathe. "You must be Julian's father." "Philippe," he said, extending his hand. "I've heard a great deal about the woman who's going to make my son's wedding perfect." His handshake was firm and warm and lasted exactly 1 second longer than it should have. "I'm doing my best," I said, pulling my hand back and immediately wishing I hadn't because now I didn't know what to do with it. "Your home is beautiful." "Thank you," he said, and something in his expression shifted, went a little sad. "My wife designed most of the gardens. She passed away 4 years ago." "I'm so sorry," I said, and meant it, because suddenly a lot of things made sense about the way this place felt, like it was beautiful but lonely, like it was waiting for something it had lost. He shrugged, a very French gesture that somehow conveyed more than words could. "She would have loved all of this," he said, gesturing to the chairs, the decorations, the evergreen garlands I'd had wrapped around the old stone pillars. "She always said this garden was made for weddings." We stood there in silence for a moment, and it should have been awkward but somehow it wasn't. The sun was starting to set, turning everything gold and pink, and I could hear Sophia's laughter from somewhere on the other side of the chateau, and I thought about how strange it was that I was standing in France with a man I'd just met, feeling like I'd known him for longer than 5 minutes. "Your daughter," he said. "Sophia. She's been teaching Marie English words. Very bad words, I'm afraid. Marie came home yesterday and told me something about Texas that I don't think is anatomically possible." I felt my face go red. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I have no idea where she learns these things, I swear I don't talk like that around her." But Philippe was laughing, really laughing, and his whole face changed when he did. Relaxed. Younger. "Don't apologize," he said. "It's the most interesting conversation I've heard in months. Marie is 12 also, yes? They're good for each other. Marie needs more friends who don't care that her father is Philippe Laurent." The way he said his own name, like it was a burden, made me like him immediately. We talked for another 20 minutes in that garden. About nothing important. About weddings and daughters and what it's like to raise a child alone. He asked me about Austin, about my business, about why I'd started planning weddings in the first place, and I found myself telling him things I usually kept to myself. About how after my divorce I'd needed to create something beautiful, something that celebrated love even though my own had failed. About how every wedding I planned felt like I was building a small miracle, even when I was exhausted and stressed and wondering why anyone thought marriage was a good idea. He listened in a way that felt rare. Really listened. Not just waiting for his turn to talk. When I finally said I should get back to work, he nodded and started to walk away. Then he turned back. "Emma," he said. "If you need anything while you're here, anything at all, please ask me directly. Don't go through Isabel. She's under a great deal of pressure right now." "Is she okay?" I asked. Philippe's expression went carefully neutral. "I think," he said slowly, "that she's discovering what she wants, and sometimes that's painful." I didn't understand what he meant then. I would understand it perfectly 24 hours later. Julian arrived the next morning, December 22nd, in a black sports car that probably cost more than my house. He was handsome in that way rich men often are, like he'd been assembled from the best parts available rather than grown naturally. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect tan even though it was December. He kissed Isabel hello like it was a chore he had to check off a list, and then he disappeared into Philippe's office for a meeting that apparently couldn't wait even though his wedding was in less than 36 hours. Isabel was different after Julian arrived. Quieter. More frantic somehow, but in a way that had gone internal, like she was screaming but only she could hear it. We spent the whole day doing final checks. The flowers arrived and they were perfect. The caterers did a test run of the timing and everything flowed beautifully. The string quartet showed up to rehearse and they sounded like angels. Everything was coming together exactly the way it should have. But I kept watching Isabel, and I kept seeing Philippe's words in her face. She's discovering what she wants, and sometimes that's painful. That night there was a rehearsal dinner. 50 people, all of them wealthy in that casual way where their clothes probably cost thousands of dollars but looked like they'd just thrown them on without thinking. Sophia and I stayed in our room because we weren't invited, weren't family, but I could hear the party from our window, the laughter and music and clinking glasses that meant people were celebrating. Around 11 at night, someone knocked on our door. It was Philippe. He was still in his dinner clothes, a dark suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine, but his tie was loose and he looked tired in a way that went deeper than just being up late. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. "But Isabel is asking for you. I think maybe she needs someone who isn't family right now." I followed him downstairs to a small sitting room away from the party. Isabel was there, curled up in a chair by the fireplace, still in her rehearsal dinner dress, mascara streaked down her face. When she saw me she started crying harder. "I can't do this," she said. "I can't marry him. Emma, I can't." I looked at Philippe. He looked back at me. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then he did something that surprised me. He left. Just quietly closed the door and left us alone. I sat down next to Isabel and held her while she cried. She told me everything. About how she'd met Julian when she was 24 and he'd seemed like everything she should want. Rich, handsome, from a good family. About how she'd convinced herself that the way she felt about him was love, even though he'd cheated on her twice that she knew about and probably more times she didn't. About how she'd thought planning this big beautiful wedding would fix something, would make her feel the way she was supposed to feel about the man she was going to spend her life with. About how 2 weeks ago she'd met someone else, a photographer who was shooting an exhibition she'd been working on, and for the first time in her life she'd understood what it actually felt like to be in love, really in love, the kind that makes you want to rearrange your entire life just to see someone smile. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "The wedding is tomorrow. Everyone is here. Julian's family, my family, everyone has spent so much money. How can I call it off now?" "How can you not?" I asked quietly. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "Isabel," I said, "I plan weddings for a living. I've planned over 200 of them. And I can tell you right now that the only thing worse than canceling a wedding is going through with one that's wrong. I've seen it happen. I've watched people stand at the altar and say vows they don't mean, and you know what? Most of them don't make it 5 years. Some don't make it 5 months. You cannot marry someone because it would be inconvenient not to." "But everyone," she started. "Everyone will understand," I said firmly. And if they don't, that's their problem, not yours. You get one life, Isabel. One. And spending it with the wrong person because you're afraid of what people will think is the worst kind of betrayal you can commit against yourself. She cried for another hour. I just held her. Somewhere around 1 a.m, she fell asleep in that chair, and I covered her with a throw blanket and slipped out of the room. Philippe was waiting in the hallway. How is she? He asked. She's asleep, I said. Philippe, I think you need to know that she doesn't want to marry your son. I know, he said quietly. I've known for weeks. I was hoping she would figure it out herself before it got to this point. We stood there in the dim hallway, surrounded by Christmas decorations and the remnants of a party celebrating a wedding that wasn't going to happen, and I felt something shift between us. Something that had been building since that first conversation in the garden. You're not surprised, I said. No, he admitted. Julian is my son and I love him, but he's not a man who should be getting married. He's too selfish still, too focused on himself. I tried to tell him to wait, to give it more time, but he didn't listen. He rarely does. What happens now? I asked. Now, Philippe said with a small smile, we deal with the disaster of a cancelled wedding on Christmas Eve. And then, if you're willing, I would very much like you to stay through Christmas anyway. You and Sophia. The château is already prepared for celebration, the food is already ordered, and I think you've both earned a vacation after dealing with this chaos. That's when I should have said no. Should have thanked him politely and made arrangements to leave. Should have protected myself from whatever was happening in my chest every time he looked at me like that, like I was something more than just a wedding planner, like I was someone worth seeing. Instead I said yes. The next morning, December 23rd, what should have been Isabel's wedding day, the château exploded into controlled chaos. Julian woke up to discover his bride wanted to call off the wedding. He reacted exactly the way you'd expect a spoiled rich man to react. Anger, denial, bargaining, more anger. He demanded to see Isabel. She refused. He threatened to sue everyone involved. Philippe shut that down with a sentence in French that I didn't understand, but that made Julian go pale and quiet. By noon, Isabel was on a plane back to Paris to be with her photographer. Julian had locked himself in his room and was apparently drinking his way through his father's wine collection. The guests were all being notified and offered accommodations through Christmas if they wanted to stay or travel arrangements if they wanted to leave. And me? I was standing in the middle of a ballroom that had been decorated for a wedding that wasn't going to happen, trying to figure out what to do with 200 centerpieces and enough food to feed a small army. Philippe found me there. You know, he said, walking slowly through the empty chairs, in France we have a saying. The best parties are the ones that weren't planned. Is that actually a French saying? I asked. No, he admitted with a smile. I just made it up. But it should be. Emma, I have a proposal for you. I turned to look at him fully. He was in jeans again, a simple black sweater, looking more relaxed than he had the entire time I'd been here. Behind him the December light was streaming through the tall windows, making everything look like a painting. Most of the guests are leaving, he said. But some are staying. Friends I haven't seen in months, family members who traveled from far away. And Marie is devastated because she was so excited about the party. So I'm thinking, why waste all of this? The decorations, the food, the music. Why not have a Christmas celebration instead? Nothing formal, nothing planned. Just people together, enjoying the holiday. And I would very much like you and Sophia to stay for it. Not as the planner. Just as guests. I can't, I started to say. Why not? He asked, and the directness of it stopped me cold. Because this is already a disaster and I need to get home and salvage my business and figure out what I'm going to tell my other clients when they ask about the destination wedding that fell apart, I said all in one breath. Because I can't afford to spend Christmas in France when I should be working. Because staying here with you feels dangerous in a way I can't quite explain but know enough to be afraid of. I didn't say that last part out loud. But I think he heard it anyway. Emma, he said, and the way he said my name made something in my chest squeeze tight. When was the last time you took a vacation? A real one, where you weren't checking your email every 5 minutes or planning someone else's happiness? I don't remember, I admitted. Then stay, he said simply. Stay for Christmas. Let me give you and your daughter a few days where you don't have to be the person holding everything together. You've earned it. And besides, he added with that smile that made him look younger, Sophia and Marie are already making plans to bake cookies and stay up late watching movies. You wouldn't want to disappoint them, would you? That's manipulation, I said, but I was smiling. It's strategy, he corrected. There's a difference. And somehow, just like that, I agreed to stay. The next 3 days were unlike anything I'd experienced in my adult life. There was no schedule, no plan, no carefully managed timeline of events. People came and went from the chateau freely. The kitchen staff prepared incredible meals that we ate whenever we were hungry, not when some timeline said we should. Sophia and Marie became inseparable, running through the chateau grounds in their winter coats, building snowmen in the garden, teaching each other their languages word by word. I watched my daughter be just a kid, carefree and happy in a way she hadn't been since the divorce, and something in me started to relax in a way I didn't even know I'd been holding tight. And Philippe was everywhere and nowhere all at once. He'd appear with perfect timing whenever I was alone, offering to show me the wine cellars or take me on a walk through the vineyards or just sit by the fire and talk about nothing important. We talked about everything. Our marriages, our failures, our fears about raising children alone. The way grief changes you, shapes you into someone you didn't expect to become. The difference between the life you plan and the life you actually get to live. He told me about his wife, about how she died suddenly of an aneurysm while gardening, how he'd found her there among her roses and thought she was just resting. About how he'd never imagined he could feel that kind of loss and survive it, but somehow he had, day by day, hour by hour. About how being with me made him remember what it felt like to want to know someone, really know them, not just share space with them. I told him about my ex-husband, about the way I'd felt myself disappearing in that marriage, becoming smaller and quieter and less myself until I didn't even recognize the woman in the mirror. About how building my business had been about proving to myself that I could create something beautiful on my own, that I didn't need someone else to validate my worth. About how terrifying it was to realize I might be falling for someone again, especially someone so completely different from the life I'd built for myself. On Christmas Eve afternoon, we were walking through the vineyard behind the chateau, just the two of us. Sophia and Marie were back at the house with the housekeeper, making some kind of elaborate French dessert that apparently involved setting things on fire intentionally. The sky was that perfect winter blue that makes everything look sharp and clear, and I could see our breath in the cold air, and Philippe's hand kept brushing against mine as we walked, not quite touching but close enough that I was hyper-aware of every almost contact. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "Of course. Why did you really say yes to staying? Not the polite reason. The real one." I stopped walking. Looked at him. He was watching me with those intense eyes, and I realized he already knew the answer, was just waiting to see if I'd be brave enough to say it out loud. "Because you scare me," I said honestly. "Because I've spent 7 years building a life where I'm safe and in control and nothing can hurt me the way my marriage hurt me. And then I met you, and suddenly that safe life feels too small, too quiet. Like I've been living in a house with all the curtains closed and you walked in and opened all the windows at once. And that's terrifying, but it's also the most alive I've felt in years, and I couldn't bring myself to walk away from that feeling." He kissed me then. Just reached out, pulled me close, and kissed me like he'd been thinking about it since the moment we met in the garden. It was soft and sure and tasted like wine and possibility, and when we finally pulled apart I was shaking but not from the cold. "I'm 56 years old," he said quietly, his forehead resting against mine. "I have a son who makes terrible decisions and a business that demands most of my time and a life that's already set in its ways. I live in France and you live in Texas. There are approximately 5,000 reasons why this is complicated. But Emma, I haven't felt this way since I was 25 years old, and I'm not ready to let it go just because it's inconvenient or impractical or 15 years apart in age. I want to know what this could be." If you're willing to find out with me. I think I said yes. I must have said yes. Because the next thing I remember is his arms around me and the two of us standing in that frozen vineyard, holding on to each other like we'd both just found something we'd been looking for without realizing we'd lost it. That Christmas Eve was magical in a way I didn't think real life could actually be. We had dinner around the huge table in the formal dining room, 20 people who'd stayed through the cancelled wedding, and instead of it being awkward or sad, it was joyful. People told stories and laughed and passed dishes around the table family style. Sophia sat next to Marie and they spoke in their mixed-up French-English that nobody else could quite follow but that made them dissolve into giggles every few minutes. Philippe sat next to me, and under the table his hand found mine and held it through the entire meal. After dinner we gathered in the living room where there was a Christmas tree that reached almost to the ceiling, covered in lights and ornaments that looked like they'd been collected over generations. Someone played piano and people sang carols in French and English and sometimes a mix of both. At some point Sophia climbed into my lap even though she was 12 and usually too cool for that kind of thing, and she whispered in my ear, "Mom, are we going to come back here? To France, I mean. To see Philippe and Marie again?" "Yes," I whispered back. "I think we are." "Good," she said. "Because I really like it here. And I really like the way you smile when you look at him. Kids see everything, even when you think you're being subtle." At midnight we bundled up and went outside into the garden for what Philippe said was a Laurent family tradition. Everyone got to make one wish for the new year and hang it on the tree in the garden, a tree that was hung with hundreds of little pieces of paper from previous years, wishes that had blown away or come true or maybe were still waiting to be answered. I wrote mine on a small piece of paper in the dark, not letting anyone see. Hung it on a branch next to Philippe's. Watched it twist in the cold breeze. Later, much later, after everyone had gone to bed and the château had gone quiet, Philippe and I sat by the fire in his study. I was curled up against him on the sofa, his arm around me, both of us too tired to talk but not ready to say goodnight yet. "What did you wish for?" I asked sleepily. "If I tell you it won't come true," he said. "That's birthday candles, not Christmas wishes." "Is there a difference?" "I think so. Birthday wishes are about you. Christmas wishes are about what you want to give to the world." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, I wished," he said slowly, "that you would take a chance on this. On us. That you wouldn't let fear or practicality or all those sensible reasons to say no stop you from seeing where this could go." I sat up, looked at him. "Philippe. I know it's asking a lot," he said. "I know I'm asking you to rearrange your life, to trust something that feels impossible, to believe in something that doesn't make logical sense. But Emma, I've spent the last 4 years going through the motions of living without actually being alive. And then you showed up with your clipboard and your practical shoes and your fierce love for your daughter, and you woke something up in me that I thought had died with my wife. So I'm asking you to be brave with me." I kissed him instead of answering with words. Kissed him until neither of us could breathe properly. And when we finally stopped I said yes again, yes to all of it, yes to figuring out how to make this work even though it was crazy and complicated and probably going to be the hardest thing I'd ever done. Yes. The next morning was Christmas. Sophia woke me up at 7 like she'd been doing since she was 3, even though she was too old to believe in Santa anymore, because Christmas morning is still magical no matter how old you are. We went downstairs in our pajamas and found Marie and Philippe already in the living room, him making coffee while she arranged presents under the tree with the kind of serious concentration that made me love her instantly. We spent the morning opening gifts and eating too much French toast and laughing at Marie's attempts to teach Sophia a French Christmas song that involved a lot of hand motions and apparently a donkey. Philippe gave me a present I hadn't expected, a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a key. To what? I asked. To the guest house on the property, he said. I know you need to go back to Austin. I know you have your business and your life there. But this way you'll have a place here whenever you can come back. For vacations, for holidays, for long weekends when Texas gets too hot. For Sophia's school breaks. Whenever you want. It's not a request or an expectation. It's just an option. A door that stays open. I cried. Right there in front of everyone on Christmas morning, I cried like a baby. Because nobody had ever given me something like that before. Not jewelry or money or things I could hold in my hand. But space. Possibility. A way to build something new without having to give up everything I'd already built. Sophia and I left 3 days later, on December 28th. The goodbye at the airport was hard in a way I hadn't prepared for. Sophia cried and made Marie promise to video chat every day. Philippe held me like he wasn't sure he'd ever get to do it again, even though we'd already made plans for him to visit Austin in February and for us to come back to France for Sophia's spring break. "I love you," he said right before we had to go through security. I know it's fast and probably too soon to say it, but I'm 56 years old and I don't want to waste time pretending I don't know exactly how I feel. "I love you too," I said, and meant it with everything in me. The flight home felt different than the flight there. Sophia slept against my shoulder most of the way, worn out from excitement and emotion. I looked out the window at the clouds and thought about how 2 weeks ago I'd been terrified about making this trip work, about whether this job would save my business or ruin it, about whether I was making a huge mistake. And now I was coming home with a canceled wedding on my resume, but also a new relationship that felt more real than anything I'd experienced in years. With a daughter who'd made a best friend across an ocean. With a future that looked completely different from the one I'd imagined for myself. Sometimes the thing that feels like a disaster is actually just the beginning of something you never knew you needed. Life back in Austin took some adjusting. I had to have some difficult conversations with potential clients about the wedding that didn't happen, but I was honest about it, told them the truth about how sometimes love means knowing when to walk away from the wrong thing. Some of them appreciated that. Some of them went with other planners. That's okay. The ones who stayed were the ones who understood that weddings should be about marriage, not just parties. Philippe and I talked every day. Morning coffee for me was evening wine for him, and we'd sit on video chat for an hour, sometimes talking about our days, sometimes just being quiet together while we worked. He told me about the vineyard, about the wine they were planning for next season. I told him about the weddings I was planning, the clients who were driving me crazy in the best way. We figured out the rhythm of a long-distance relationship, how to make it work when what you want most is to be in the same room as the person you love. He visited in February like he promised. Stayed for 10 days. Met my friends, saw my office, took Sophia and me to dinner at the best restaurants in Austin and acted like Texas barbecue was the most exotic thing he'd ever experienced. My friends were skeptical at first, worried about the age difference, concerned about how serious we seemed so fast. But then they saw us together and understood. Sometimes you just know. Sometimes the right thing doesn't need time to figure itself out. Sophia and I went back to France for spring break. Spent 2 weeks at the château, and this time it felt different. Less like visiting, more like coming home to a second place. Philippe had set up the guest house exactly the way he'd promised, with a bedroom for Sophia that Marie had helped decorate and a workspace for me where I could keep running my business even from across the ocean. We talked about logistics, about how to make this work long-term. About international schools and business partnerships and whether love was enough to build a life across 2 continents. It is, I decided. It absolutely is. By summer we had a plan. I would keep my business in Austin but expand it to include destination weddings in France, using Philippe's connections and the château as a base. Sophia would split her time between Austin and France, going to school in Austin during the regular year and spending summers and long breaks in France with Marie. Philippe would split his time too, spending a few months a year in Texas, learning to appreciate sweet tea and football even if he never quite understood either one. It wasn't perfect. Long-distance relationships never are. There were hard moments, lonely nights, times when the distance felt impossible and I wondered if we were crazy to try to build something across an ocean. But then he'd show up at my door in Austin with flowers and that smile, or I'd land in Paris and see him waiting for me, or we'd be on video chat and he'd say something that made me laugh so hard I cried, and I'd remember why this was worth it. Because love isn't about finding someone who fits perfectly into the life you already have. Sometimes it's about being willing to build a completely new life that has room for both of you. A year after that cancelled Christmas wedding, Philippe asked me to marry him. We were in the vineyard again, the same spot where he'd kissed me for the first time. It was fall this time, and the vines were heavy with grapes, and the whole world smelled like harvest and possibility. Sophia and Marie were there, both of them in on the secret, both of them crying before I even said yes. He didn't have some elaborate speech prepared. Just got down on one knee and said, "Emma Rodriguez, will you build a crazy, complicated, beautiful life with me?" I said yes. Of course I said yes. We got married the following spring, in the same garden where Isabel's wedding should have happened. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Sophia was my maid of honor. Marie was Philippe's. We wrote our own vows, and I promised to always take chances on love even when it scared me, to never let fear make me smaller, to believe that good things can come from unexpected places. He promised to always open the windows, to keep showing me that life is bigger and more beautiful than I think it is, to love both me and Sophia like we'd always been part of his family. Everyone cried. Even the tough French relatives who pretended they didn't believe in romance. My business grew in ways I never expected. Turned out that being the wedding planner whose destination wedding got cancelled but who fell in love with the groom's father was actually great marketing. People liked the story. They liked the honesty. They liked that I understood that weddings should be about love, real love, not just about throwing a pretty party. I started getting calls from people who wanted a planner who would tell them the truth, who would help them figure out if they were getting married for the right reasons. I expanded to France like we planned. Started doing destination weddings at the château and at other venues throughout the Loire Valley. Philippe's connections in the wine industry opened doors I never could have opened on my own. We became a team, him handling the French logistics and vendor relationships, me bringing my American efficiency and attention to detail. It worked beautifully. We worked beautifully. Sophia thrived in ways that surprised both of us. Learning French, splitting her time between two countries, having Marie as basically a sister. She grew up understanding that love doesn't fit into neat boxes, that family can be chosen as much as given, that sometimes the best adventures are the ones you never planned for. She's 17 now, applying to colleges, talking about studying international business so she can work with both Philippe's vineyard and my wedding planning company. She calls Philippe her bonus dad, and the way his face lights up every time she says it makes my heart hurt in the best way. As for Julian, well, life has a funny way of working things out. He eventually apologized to all of us, admitted he hadn't been ready for marriage, thanked Isabel for being brave enough to call it off when he hadn't been. He's dating someone now who challenges him, pushes him to be better. They're taking it slow. Learning. Growing. Philippe says his son is finally becoming a man, and I can see the pride in his eyes when he says it. And Isabel? She married her photographer 2 years after she left Julian at the altar. Small ceremony in Paris, just family. She sent me a card thanking me for telling her the truth when she needed to hear it, for giving her permission to choose herself. She's happy now, really happy, in that way you can only be when you're with the person you're supposed to be with. But I want to tell you about something that happened last Christmas, because it brings everything full circle in a way that still makes me emotional when I think about it. We were back at the château for the holidays, all of us together. Sophia and Marie, now 17 and basically inseparable even across an ocean. Philippe and me, married for 3 years and still acting like newlyweds according to everyone who knows us. Julian and his girlfriend, who I actually really like. A bunch of friends and family, the château full of people and noise and life. Christmas Eve night, we were doing the tradition again, the one where everyone writes a wish and hangs it on the tree in the garden. I stood there with my piece of paper, trying to figure out what to write, because what do you wish for when you already have everything you wanted? Sophia came up beside me. "You okay, Mom?" she asked. "Yeah, baby. Just thinking." "About what?" "About 5 years ago," I said. "When we came here for the first time. When I thought my life was falling apart because a wedding got cancelled. I had no idea that it was actually the beginning of everything good." She leaned against me, this tall, beautiful, almost woman who used to be my little girl. You know what I remember most about that trip? She said. Not the cancelled wedding or any of the drama. I remember you laughing with Philippe in the garden. I remember thinking I'd never seen you look that happy, that free. Like you'd forgotten how to be scared. I had forgotten, I realized. Or maybe I'd just decided that being scared wasn't a good enough reason to say no to something beautiful. I wrote my wish on the paper. Hung it next to Philippe's, like I had 5 years ago. Watched it twist in the breeze with all the other wishes, all the other people hoping for love or luck or just one more year of being together with the people who matter. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Philippe found me standing by the window in our room, looking out at the garden covered in fresh snow. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, rested his chin on my shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. Everything, I said. How different my life is from what I thought it would be. How I almost said no to staying here that first time. How scared I was of letting myself feel this way about you. Are you still scared? He asked. Terrified, I admitted. Every single day. Because now I have so much to lose. You, Sophia, this life we've built. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night convinced it's all going to disappear. He turned me around to face him. Emma, he said, and his voice was so gentle it made my eyes sting with tears. Love is always scary. If it's not, you're not doing it right. But the fear means it matters. It means you're alive. It means you haven't let life make you small and safe and numb. And I wouldn't trade one moment of this terrifying, beautiful, complicated life with you for a lifetime of safe and easy with anyone else. I kissed him then, standing in our bedroom in the château that had become my second home, and I thought about all the ways life surprises you. All the ways it breaks your heart and then puts it back together in a shape you didn't expect but that somehow fits better than the original. Because here's what I learned from all of this, and I need you to really hear me on this. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen is actually the best thing in disguise. Sometimes the disaster is just clearing space for something better. Sometimes you have to lose what you thought you wanted to find what you actually need. When I flew to France 5 years ago to plan that wedding, I thought I was going to save my business. I thought success looked like executing a perfect destination wedding, getting great photos for my portfolio, building my reputation. I had my whole life planned out. Stay in Austin. Grow my business slowly and carefully. Focus on Sophia. Keep my heart locked up tight where nobody could hurt it again. Safe. Controlled. Small. But life had different plans. Life took that wedding I was supposed to plan and turned it into ashes. And from those ashes came something I never could have planned for. Love. Real love. The kind that scares you and challenges you and makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about yourself. The kind that makes you bigger instead of smaller. I'm not saying you should hope for disasters. I'm not saying cancelled weddings are good things. What I'm saying is that sometimes when your carefully laid plans fall apart, it's because life is making room for something you couldn't have imagined. Something that requires you to be brave, to take risks, to trust that maybe, just maybe, you deserve more than the safe life you've been settling for. I spent 7 years after my divorce building walls. Protecting myself. Making sure nobody could get close enough to hurt me the way my ex-husband did. And those walls kept me safe, sure. But they also kept me lonely. They kept me from living fully, from loving completely, from taking the kinds of chances that make life worth living. Meeting Philippe didn't just change my romantic life. It changed everything. It showed me that I'd been living small, thinking small, dreaming small because I was afraid. It taught me that love isn't about finding someone who fits perfectly into your existing life. It's about being willing to build a new life together, even when that's scary and complicated and means giving up some of the control you've been clinging to. It taught me that age is just a number when you find someone who sees you, really sees you, and loves what they see. That 15 years difference doesn't matter when you're with someone who makes you feel more yourself than you've ever been. That long distance is hard but possible when you're with someone worth the distance. That blending families and cultures and lives across an ocean is messy and difficult and absolutely worth every moment of struggle. It taught me that my daughter was watching me the whole time, learning from my choices about what love looks like, what courage looks like, what it means to take chances on happiness even when you're afraid. And that the best gift I could give her wasn't stability or safety or a carefully controlled life. It was showing her that it's okay to be scared and do the scary thing anyway. That it's okay to let your plans change when something better comes along. That it's okay to build a life that doesn't look like anyone else's life, as long as it's true to who you are. Sophia is 17 now and she's fearless in ways I never was at her age. She applies for opportunities that scare her. She travels alone between countries like it's nothing. She speaks 2 languages fluently and is learning a 3rd. She talks about her future with this confidence that takes my breath away, this certainty that the world is big and full of possibilities and she's going to grab as many of them as she can. That's because she watched me do it first. She watched me fall in love with a French widower and figure out how to build a life across 2 continents. She watched me expand my business into territory I'd never imagined. She watched me be scared and do it anyway, over and over again. And that's the real gift that came from that canceled Christmas wedding 5 years ago. Not just love, though God knows I'm grateful for that every single day. But permission. Permission to want more. Permission to take chances. Permission to believe that the best parts of your life might still be ahead of you, even when you think you've got it all figured out. I'm 46 years old now. I run a successful international wedding planning business. I'm married to a man I love more than I knew it was possible to love someone. I have a daughter who's growing into an incredible woman. I split my time between Texas and France, and both places feel like home. My life is complicated and messy and requires constant communication and compromise and jumping through international travel hoops. And it's absolutely perfect. Not perfect like nothing ever goes wrong. We fight sometimes. We disagree about business decisions and parenting choices and whether French or American coffee is better. Long distance is hard, even now. There are weeks when we're apart and I miss him so much it physically hurts. There are moments when juggling 2 countries and 2 cultures and 2 completely different ways of living feels impossible. But it's perfect because it's real. Because it's built on truth and choice and the daily decision to keep choosing each other even when it's hard. Because it's the life I actively wanted, not the life I settled for because I was afraid of wanting more. And I want you to know that this kind of transformation is possible for you too. Maybe not the exact same story, not the French château and the billionaire widower and the destination wedding that wasn't. But the essence of it. The courage to let your life change when change is calling. The willingness to say yes to something that scares you because the possibility of what it could become is worth the risk. Maybe for you it looks like finally leaving the job that's killing your soul to start the business you've been dreaming about. Maybe it's saying yes to the date with someone who's nothing like your usual type. Maybe it's moving to a new city or going back to school or adopting the dog or taking the trip or having the conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's just admitting to yourself that the life you're living isn't the life you actually want, and that's okay. And it's not too late to change it. Because here's the truth that took me 41 years to learn. You are not a tree. You can move. You can change. You can build a completely different life than the one you're living right now, and the only thing stopping you is fear. And I get it. Fear is powerful. Fear kept me safe for 7 years. Fear told me that trying again after my divorce was too risky. That opening my heart was asking for pain, that the smart thing to do was focus on my business and my daughter and forget about romance or adventure or anything that couldn't be controlled and planned and predicted. Fear is a liar. Fear tells you that safe is the same as happy. It's not. Safe is just safe. And sometimes safe is exactly what you need, for a season, while you heal and rebuild and remember who you are. But if you stay in safe too long, it stops being protection and starts being a prison. I know there are people watching this who are thinking, that's great for you, Emma, but my situation is different. I'm too old, too young, too broke, too busy, too damaged, too scared. I don't have the option of just saying yes to a billionaire in a château. My life is harder than that. My choices are more limited than that. And you're right. Your situation is different. Your challenges are real. I'm not saying you should quit your job tomorrow or leave your marriage or make impulsive choices that put you or your family at risk. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that transformation doesn't require dramatic gestures. It requires tiny acts of courage, repeated over time. It requires paying attention to the moments when life offers you something unexpected, and instead of automatically saying no, you pause and ask yourself, what if I said yes? What if I took this chance? What would that look like? It requires being honest with yourself about what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what would be practical or sensible or what other people expect from you. What do you actually want? What makes you feel alive? What would you do if you weren't afraid? And then it requires taking one small step in that direction. Just one. Not the whole journey all at once. Just the next step. For me, that step was saying yes when Philippe asked me to stay for Christmas. I didn't know where it would lead. I didn't have a plan for how to make an international relationship work or how to build a business across 2 continents. I just knew that walking away felt wrong, and staying felt right, even though it was scary. One yes led to another yes led to another yes, and 5 years later here I am, living a life I couldn't have imagined back when I was standing in that garden at the château, trying to figure out what to do with 200 centerpieces and a broken heart for my client. So I'm asking you, what's your yes? What's the thing you're saying no to because it's scary or impractical or doesn't fit into the life you've already built? What's the opportunity that's knocking that you're pretending not to hear? Maybe you don't know yet. That's okay. Just start paying attention. Start noticing the moments when you feel alive, when you feel like yourself, when you feel that little spark of this is right even if I don't know why. Start noticing the things you're saying no to automatically, without even considering whether they might be worth a yes. And when you find it, that thing that scares you and excites you in equal measure, take a breath and say yes. Say yes even though you don't know how it's going to work out. Say yes even though it's going to be complicated and messy and require you to be braver than you think you can be. Say yes because the alternative is spending your life wondering what if, and that's the saddest way to live. You are not too old for this. You are not too damaged for this. You are not too late for this. The best parts of your life are not behind you. They're waiting for you to be brave enough to reach for them. I promise you that. I promise you that with every bit of my being. Because I lived it. I was you. I was the single mom in her early 40s who thought her chance at love had passed. I was the woman who played it safe because she'd been hurt too badly to risk being hurt again. I was the person who had her life all mapped out and thought that changing course would mean admitting failure. And then life gave me a gift wrapped in disaster, and I almost said no to it because it didn't look like what I expected. But I said yes instead, and it changed everything. So here's what I want you to take from my story. Not that you should go to France and fall in love with a billionaire, though hey, if that opportunity presents itself, maybe don't say no automatically. But that you should be open to the possibility that your life can change. That it's supposed to change. That growth and transformation and new chapters aren't just for young people or lucky people or people whose lives are less complicated than yours. They're for anyone brave enough to say yes when yes is scary. They're for anyone willing to trust that sometimes the disaster is just clearing space for the blessing. They're for anyone ready to stop living small and start living true. And I know you can do this. I know you can because I did it, and I'm nothing special. I'm just a woman who decided that being scared wasn't a good enough reason to say no to love. Who decided that my daughter deserved to see me living fully, not just surviving safely. Who decided that the life I wanted was worth fighting for, even when fighting meant letting go of control and trusting that things would work out even without a detailed plan. You can do this too. Whatever your version of this is. Whatever scary yes is waiting for you. You can do it. Take the trip. Have the conversation. Apply for the job. Send the text. Book the flight. Try the thing. Take the class. Make the call. Whatever it is that your heart keeps whispering about when you're quiet enough to listen, do that. Do it afraid. Do it messy. Do it imperfectly. But do it. Because 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when you're looking back at your life, you won't regret the things you tried that didn't work out. You'll regret the things you didn't try because you were too afraid. You'll regret the yes you turned into no's because it was safer that way. Don't let fear write your story. Don't let practicality steal your joy. Don't let the life you think you should want keep you from reaching for the life you actually want. Say yes. Say yes to the scary thing. Say yes to the complicated thing. Say yes to the thing that doesn't make sense on paper but makes perfect sense in your heart. Say yes. That's how you build a life that feels like yours. That's how you create something beautiful out of disaster. That's how you find love when you thought love was done finding you. That's how you teach your kids or your friends or yourself that courage looks like being afraid and doing it anyway. Say yes. I'm sitting here in my home in Austin right now, even though Philippe is in France for the next 2 weeks handling harvest season at the vineyard. We'll video chat in an hour when it's his evening and my afternoon. Tomorrow I have 3 client meetings for weddings I'm planning, 1 in Austin, 2 at the château in France. Next month Sophia and I fly back to France for her fall break. In 2 months Philippe flies here for Thanksgiving. In 3 months we'll all be in France for Christmas again, and we'll write our wishes on pieces of paper and hang them on the tree in the garden, and I'll stand there grateful for every single thing that had to fall apart 5 years ago for this life to come together. This is what saying yes built. This messy, complicated, beautiful, scary, perfect life. And I want this for you too. Not my exact life, but your version of it. The one where you're brave enough to reach for what you want. The one where you trust that you deserve good things. The one where you let yourself be happy, really happy, the kind of happy that scares you because you have so much to lose. That's the only kind of happy worth having. So if you're watching this and something in you is stirring, some part of you that's been asleep or hiding or playing it safe, wake it up. Listen to it. Honor it. That's the part of you that knows what you need, what you want, what you're meant to do next. Don't ignore it because it's inconvenient. Don't silence it because it's scary. Don't talk yourself out of it because it doesn't fit into the plan. The plan is overrated. Trust me. I had a plan, and it was fine, and then it fell apart and something infinitely better took its place. But only because I was willing to let go of the plan and reach for something that felt true instead of something that felt safe. You can do this. You absolutely can do this. And when you do, when you take that scary step and say that scary yes and build that scary beautiful life, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that once upon a time you watched a video about a woman who planned a wedding that never happened and fell in love with the groom's father, and you decided that if she could be that brave, maybe you could be brave too. Maybe you could say yes too. Maybe you could live fully too. You can. I promise you can. Now go do it. Go be brave. Go say yes. Go build the life that's waiting for you on the other side of fear. You've got this. I believe in you. And I can't wait to hear your story when you do. If you're still here with me, if you made it all the way to the end of this story, I want you to do something for me. Tell me in the comments where you are right now and what time it is as you're watching this. Tell me where in the world you're hearing this message. Because I love knowing that my story is reaching people everywhere, that maybe something I said made a difference for someone I'll never meet. And while you're down there in the comments, hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe to Drama Coda if you want to hear more stories like this one, real stories about real people figuring out how to live and love and be brave. Because I've got more to share. Stories about second chances and new beginnings and what happens when you decide that your life is worth fighting for. Next video I'm going to tell you about my friend Charlotte, who quit her corporate job at 53 to open a bookstore in a tiny town in Vermont, and how that decision led to the most amazing plot twist involving her high school sweetheart who she hadn't seen in 35 years. You're going to want to hear this one. Trust me. So subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Stay with me. Because these stories, these reminders that it's never too late to change your life, never too late to be brave, never too late to say yes to something that scares you, I think we all need to hear them as often as possible. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about my story and about Isabel's story and about Sophia's story and about all the ways love can surprise us when we least expect it. Now go live your story. Make it a good one. Make it a brave one. Make it true. I'll see you in the next video.